What's going on, YouTube? Got here a 2010 Prius, and I'm going to reset the oil maintenance light indicator. So hit the power on button twice, and then you want to get it into, you want to hit your trip button and get it into trip A. See how mine's in trip A, V, miles. You want it in trip A. So trip A, then cut the car back off. Now, when you turn the car on, you want to hold this kilometer miles an hour button. So put your foot on the brake, hold the kilometer miles an hour button, and then hold the power button. And when you hold it, you see it'll reset the data. You just hold both those buttons down, don't let up until it's fully done, and now you can let up. So now your oil maintenance light's been reset. And that will pretty much work on any Toyota. Usually have to set it to trip A, then turn the key off, and then hold that odometer button down, and then turn the key on, continuing to hold that odometer button, and it will take a couple seconds and reset that. But anyway, let's get this oil changed. There's the hood latch right there at the top of this kick panel. Alright, then you pop the hood, you look straight under the front, lift it up a little bit. There's a little latch right here. You just lift straight up on that latch, and then you can raise the hood up, and under the hood put this down. It's got two spots. You can put it here or put it here, and of course we're going to do an oil change, so we'll need to be checking the oil here at the dipstick and filling the oil. And as you can see, I like to mark my oil filler cap. It's got a little scratch in it. It's probably hard to see. It says 4.5. That's how many quarts of oil it takes. So a lot of times I just kind of loosen this up, and then now we'll get the car jacked up. Alright, I got my trusty Harbor Freight 2.5 ton here. Low profile. Not that it's really necessary, but kind of tight in my garage here. But we'll get this up a little bit closer, and if you can see, there's a jack point right here under the car, right here on this. It's kind of a pinch point. But anyway, we'll get it jacked up. There's the spot under the car. You could jack it up on these heavier panels in front of it too, but usually the jack point is going to be sufficient. And I usually just jack up one side of the car. I'll jack it up a pretty good little ways, get the tire off the ground, and then I will put a jack stand under it. Just got your old Harbor Freight 6 ton. I want to say the recall was on the 3 tons. But anyway, got the car jacked up pretty good little ways on one side. And we will go under here, put this jack stand under something heavy and metal, just in case the other one fails. And that should be sufficient. And if you look up under here, this car has 240,000 miles almost on it. But this panel right here has to be opened, so we'll take off this fastener, and fold this panel back. But it's been folded back so many times that I've had to zip tie it. Let me get some tools. When I drain my oil, I kind of like using these buckets, as long as you've got enough room to fit it up under. It's like a car wash bucket, but if you look inside the bucket, it's got the marks, so when you drain your oil, you can see exactly how much you have pretty easily. And plus, this has this little pour spout, so it makes it, when you pour your oil into your whatever you're going to recycle it with, it's not dripping so bad. I find those low flat trays are super drippy. Anyway, let's get under there. So as you can see on this retainer here, you put a screwdriver in it and pull it out. Pull out the center of it. I got the center pulled out, and then the rest of it will pull out. See, so that side will be loosened up, and this other side, the fasteners have been, there are two different kinds. That's those two. And then I've got one more here, and this is a different style. As you can see, this style here is just a pull-out type. So I'll get a pair of pliers. Probably not the best. See, so this one just pulls straight out. And then we should be able to fold this back, which will, of course, expose the oil drain plug and the oil filter. And if you notice with this oil filter, this is one of those, it wasn't quite the right size. And as you can see, this is an original Toyota oil drain plug filter. So these are about $14, but for whatever reason I didn't want to wait. Walmart had something that was close enough. I want to say it was 44 millimeters or 43 millimeters. And it was two different sizes. The inner is smaller than the outer. So I used a bandsaw, cut the outer off, and then I JB welded this onto it. So now all I need is a 3/8 of an inch socket, and I'll just pop that on there and take it off. Of course, the only downside of this is you don't have that little drain plug, that you can't drain this before you take it off. But you just start to take it off and it'll just drip here, which is fine. So, usually I'm replacing the washer on this, but I've never replaced the washer on this, and I've done at least 20 oil changes. If it doesn't leak, I feel like it really doesn't need to be replaced. This looks like it's either 14 or 15 millimeter. Was able to loosen it up. But anyway, let's get that taken off. So I'm gonna keep backing that off. Got my glove ready. I drove the car already, so it's pretty warm. So I would definitely recommend having a glove on because it can burn your skin. Being that it's winter though, the oil is not really too hot. So it's been about 4,800 miles since I changed the oil. And usually what I do is I'll do the filter every other oil change, and then I'll do the oil every 5,000 miles basically. I used to go a little longer when I did more highway miles, but I find that it's just easier to get on a schedule, so your odometer's always at the same spot. Anyway, we'll let this drain. Alright, so it's still draining. It's almost completely stopped. Probably can get another ounce out of it, but it really doesn't make much difference. O-ring still looks good on this, so I haven't done the filter yet. Put this back in. And then you don't want to forget, so let's snug this back up. And you know, with a wrench this long, you know, it's about 1 foot long, so if you pull about 10 or 12 pounds, that should be all you need. It's not going to fall off. And you clean this up. I'm just using the light to hold this engine cover up here. And then here's the oil filter. So, like I said, normally you would put one of these Toyota filter wrenches on there, and then you could use an open-end adjustable wrench or a bigger socket. It probably looks like it's 24 millimeter, probably something like that, pretty big. But as you can see, I just leave this adapter on here. So I'm fine. Remember, then you can take this wrench off, because you. So like I was saying earlier, there's a drain plug in the outside of this. I feel like it's a waste of time to take this off and replace the O-ring in that drain plug. You might as well just crack it loose like this, let it drip, you know, keep draining it. You see it's got like half a thread left. And this drains just as good as that oil plug, and you're saving yourself a lot of time and hassle. Plus, if you replace that O-ring in this, there's a possibility you mess it up, and that could just be a place that it could leak. So let's get pretty close. So I usually like to do the oil first, and then do the oil filter. But we'll let this drain, and we'll get that pulled out and take a look at replacing it. So I got this pulled off, and I'll just turn it upside down like this and let the rest of it drain out. And then we will replace the oil filter. I'll show you how to do that. Alright, here's the oil filter. It just pulls straight off this cartridge. You can drain the rest of the oil out. And a lot of times I'll just leave it down in the oil, and then when I drain the oil into the bucket, it'll be ready. So you want to make sure you're not getting any dirt. Make sure your rag's clean. Get this clean. Quite often I do not replace this O-ring most of the time, but just for the sake of this video, I usually do it every couple times. So you just get under this O-ring with a little pick or flat nose plier. Take this O-ring off right here. So here's my new part number. Is most anything with a 10, 3, 5, 8. So the Fram, or I just bought a pack of STPs on eBay, was like $15 for 10, and I've had this car for so long, and I'll probably replace it. It's been such a good car, I'll replace it with another one. So the oil filter just goes right back down here, and because this oil filter mounts sideways, there's really no reason to fill this up with oil. Like a lot of people fill it up with oil and then put it back up, but it's just going to drain out and make a big mess. And I haven't really noticed any benefits or any difference. But anyway, we'll get that. Here's the O-ring. So just pretty much just goes, pull it on, goes back in that same groove. And a lot of times I don't like to replace the O-ring because if it wasn't leaking, I feel like if I replace it, it might cause a problem. So get a little bit of oil on your finger and rub it around that O-ring. You want to get that super lubed up, because if this O-ring bunches up when you're putting this filter on, it could definitely leak. And definitely after you change it and put it back together, you're going to want to, start it and then check and make sure you're not having any leaks, because you will destroy your engine if you run it without oil. Alright, so we're back up under the car. We got our filter loaded. Just one last check, make sure the O-ring's seated good, and if this filter is all the way down, it has a little spring. So when it's seated all the way in, it makes sure that it holds this filter tight. But anyway, just make sure you do not frost thread this. It should spin on real easy, and then once it's spin on a couple threads, you'll feel where that new O-ring is seating. Let me grab my wrench, line it up, swap it clockwise, so it should go in fairly easy and be fairly smooth. You shouldn't feel like the friction is changing, and you'll just run it until it basically bottoms out. And you do not want to tighten this, over tightness. So basically it's all the way plastic on plastic, and I just give it like just maybe 5 or 10 pounds worth. That's it. That's all you need, and it will come off nice and easy next time, and it's not going to leak. So basically the reverse of what we did up here, we'll put the plugs back in, put this back up. So let me get that taken care of. Alright, so I got that all back up under there. Now if you were to be doing an oil, the transmission oil, there's basically a drain and fill, and it's basically right under here, and I would use an extension. Alright, once all that's tied up, pull out your jack stand. Be careful, don't let the car fall on you. And of course when you break this loose, you'll find that you just push the jack handle down, kind of like you're jacking it up, and you want this piece on the jack to be going straight, because if it's angled, it's going to bind up. So the straighter it is, the easier it is to break this loose slowly. You just let it down slowly. That way you don't have to worry about the jack slipping. And you also want to make sure that if you're on a hard surface or whatever, the jack should roll as the car comes down, because if the jack does not roll, it's going to want to pull the other side of the car or pull the jack to it, and the car could fall off the jack. Anyway, let's check out the oil. Alright, here's the oil we got out of it. And if you look, we've got, the car normally holds 4.5 quarts, and I drained about 4, just under 4. So it's used about half a quart, which is pretty normal for something that's got 240 miles. We're putting 10W, 0 to 20. Cool. Alright, my high mileage Super Tech. This is usually like $15 for 5 quarts, so of course I put in all 5, but half a quart, and that should be good. And then I may end up using 3, and then just doing 1.5 on this, because this is what I used last time. I definitely say I would go with the Valvoline over the Super Tech, but it sort of depends. If this is on sale, it's like 20 bucks, but I haven't really noticed much difference in oil consumption over the last 100,000 miles I've had this car. So I'm going to take out my oil filter cap, make sure you don't have any leaves or trash or dirt that's going to drop down inside. And of course it says 0 to 20, so it's supposed to use. And I used to go with a heavier oil on cars that started to burn oil, but now I just pretty much just leave it. So you want to make sure that your funnel doesn't have dirt in it that's going to go into your engine. And I just kind of squeeze the funnel a little bit to get it to kind of pinch and hold against the firewall, because one of the greatest things in the world is when you're filling your oil and the funnel falls over. So this has 3 quarts in it. So I'll go ahead and bump all 3 quarts in here, and then I'll add 1.5 from the other one. And then I'll start it up, check for leaks, and then check my oil level again, and just to make sure. But I've changed the oil in this car so many times, it's pretty much always 4.5. I want to say it calls for 4.3 or 4.4, but because my car burns oil, it's going to need that oil. Alright, so I got the 3 quarts added, and I'm fixing to add 1.5 quarts of the Walmart oil. One thing I will say about the Walmart oils is this foil right here, it's always this real thin protective cover that comes off, and you want to be real careful, because if this piece of thin plastic gets in your engine, it may not have a problem. Your oil filter may catch it, but it could possibly get anywhere that oil needs to be lubricated, down any of the camshaft or crankshaft journals. If it clogs one thing up, it's going to starve that part for oil, and you're eventually going to have an engine failure potentially from one tiny little thing. So if I notice here, see it's got 4 quarts, 3 quarts, so I know I need to be, this is 5 quarts, I need to be right here to this mark, right there below that number. So I will add what feels like about 1 quart, and I will check it. See, I got about a 1/2 quart to go. I will add a little bit more. You really don't want to add more, because then it's kind of a pain. You see I'm right there between 4 quarts and 3 quarts, so that should be good enough. And you can always pull your dipstick, but of course until you start your engine, that oil filter area is going to be low on oil. It's going to look like it's high. And I will also note that when you do check oil on these cars, if you run the car and then you shut the car off, the first time you pull the oil dipstick, it will usually look low. And I believe that is because most of these engines are sealed up pretty good. It looks like the level's about perfect. So when the engine cools and everything's sealed, the oil that's going up this dipstick, it will pull a slight vacuum as it cools, and will pull that level down a little bit lower. So on the first pull, it usually will always look a little bit low. That's after you run the engine and then let it cool. But of course now the oil filler cap is off. Still looks like it's looking pretty good. I might just add a splash more, and then we'll put the cap back on. So get your rag ready under the funnel, because when you pull this thing out, unless you want to sit here and wait for a while, and usually what I do with my funnel is I just set it in the trash can like this, and it'll drip a couple drips. We'll come back over here, and I like to put my oil cap up here on top, just make sure it's clean around this O-ring, wasn't having any leaks or anything. And you shouldn't need to go too tight. I am kind of paranoid that this is going to come off, so I'd say just one hand, snug should be good. We'll check the oil one more time just to make sure. It looks like it's just above that high mark. So we will start the car up and check for leaks. Alright, back in the car, foot on the brake, press this button, and it's a Prius, so it's not going to start most of the time, still in park, but you can put your foot on the gas and it will cause the engine to start up, so you can run it for a couple seconds, and then just let it cut off, and then go check back under for leaks. Alright, I let it run for a couple seconds. Doesn't look like I've got any leaks anywhere, so that's good. Didn't expect any. So while we're here, I mean, every time you change the oil, you want to, check your tires. Of course, these cars, as long as your tire pressure monitoring system's working, it's not going to let it get below 3 or 4 pounds low. Clean out any leaves, debris that you might have underneath. Check your brake fluid. This little piece right here, these 2 little clips come off. You can lift this up to check your brake fluid. You always want to check your brake fluid. Of course, you can see it here. Now with a Prius, I've only replaced the brake pads one time in 5 or 6 years and 100,000 miles, because it uses the regenerative braking system for most of its primary braking. So you'll find that the pads last a really, really long time. And if I was to be able to see in there with my light, of course, then you would note that probably have a ton of brake pad left, because it's been about 30 or 40,000 miles since I changed them. When I changed them the first time, it had about 180,000 miles. The only service that I've had to do to this car is the EGR cooler. They are kind of temperamental on these cars. I run mine pretty hard, so it doesn't seem to clog up too bad, but it is a pain to get to. Back under here, there's an EGR cooler right there, that shiny thing kind of back there in the center of the shot. All this has to come out, all the air box has to come out, and it's usually so filled with sediment that you basically, it seems like the best practice is to take a pressure washer and pressure wash it. But anyway, check your brake fluid. I usually say I don't add brake fluid because the next time you put brakes in, you're going to push it all the way back up. So as long as it's in this range, I generally do not just keep filling to the max, because this level is basically telling me from where it was to where it's at. That's how much my brake pads have worn. So that's giving me a good indication of how much life it has left. The Prius uses the same Toyota Long Life, the pink fluid for the inverter. This is the inverter coolant, and you see how nice and pink this looks. Now, I've never changed my inverter fluid, and I don't think it's ever been changed, but I did buy a gallon or two of the Long Life to do the antifreeze, because the antifreeze obviously is getting much more wear on it. I'm still on my original water pump and traction battery as well, but this has, I sucked all the fluid out of this and then added fresh fluid just in here, and I did that twice, and you can see the level never changes. There's really almost no evaporation in the system. So I feel like this is kind of a non-issue, and I know if you drain this, there's a plug down at the bottom of the transmission somewhere. You can drain it, but then you're going to get air in the system. You're going to have to purge it properly, so you're just kind of asking to maybe create a problem where there wasn't a problem. But anyway, the coolant is over here. You can see the full mark is right here where this ridge is. So, and it will go down just very slightly, like almost none on these newer vehicles. I've probably added a couple ounces of fluid over 100,000 miles, so almost nothing. And then of course, you know, if you're under here, you could say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and check my air filter. And this box has two clips at the front and hinges right here at the back, and you can lift this off and check your air filter. I've never changed this air filter. I don't generally drive in a dirty environment, but you can still see light through it. So every once in a while I'll blow it out, and I've heard conflicting things about blowing it. Don't blow it out, just replace it. But I mean, if it has some big sediment in it, I'll replace it. But that's pretty much it on a Prius. They're really super low maintenance. If you look down here on the side of the block, there is a harmonic balancer down there, but everything else is electronic. The power steering is electronic. The alternator and the starter are built into the drive unit, which is in the transmission. So there's no belts, there's no accessory belts at all, and so it's super simple, because that would usually be most of your problems with a car that you would have. You know, the accessory belt tensioner bearings would go bad. It's usually a common problem, or belt problems, you know, squeaking, stuff like that. So that basically is never a problem. So that's really all the maintenance there is, besides, you know, windshield wiper fluid here on the Prius. Use a decent amount of it. And a couple times, this car's a little bit older, but I've had to buff out the headlights. You know, they are plastic headlights. And I'll usually use 2000 grit sandpaper, and then I'll use a heavy buffing compound with a buffing pad and a drill or a buffer, and then I'll use the medium buffing compound, and I like to use New Finish once a year call polish. I'll use that on it as a top coat, and usually it'll last a year or two, but you'll notice your lights get worse and worse at night, you know, to the point where just go ahead and buff your headlights out. But anyway, it's been a good car for me. I would definitely recommend it. I was kind of worried about, you know, the traction battery having problems or whatever, but it's been pretty decent. But anyway, if this helped you out, I would appreciate if you give me a like, or potentially subscribe if you'd like to. Anyway, I'll be trying to do some more car videos in the future anytime I do something that it looks like it might help somebody else out. But anyway, thanks for watching.